All right, Ryan. So I'm excited. We've got something coming up in September 11th to 13th, the SV Focus Lab. And the SV Focus Lab is going to be a time when the whole SV team comes together in Northwest Arkansas to really kind of do a different type of teaching, practice, and really just focus on some of our cutting edge work and helping you kind of be a part of this think tank process with us.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. I was excited before, but then when we laid out what we're going to do, I'm like, this is going to be different. This is going to be good. So yeah, this SV Focus Lab, it's going to be a workshop September 11th through the 13th, 2025, in case you're hearing this a little bit later. And we're really not going to do tons of teaching. We'll talk about a concept. It's going to be lots of practice. It's going to have more of a lab feel. It's also going to have a little bit of a retreat feel. We're going to have a coffee time before. We're just hanging out before. Going to have happy hour afterwards. So the social connection piece. But I'm excited because one of the things I'm excited about is the way we've designed the afternoons. Usually role plays at EFT trainings are just exposure. Mm-hmm. But we're going to do exposure, and then we're going to do some reworking. Then we're going to do competency. We want you to get it in the second role play where you repeat it with help and with people watching and maybe even videoing. So I'm not going to expose anybody, anything like that. But it's going to be good. It's going to be different. And so we're going to jump in there and get hands-on. It'll have kind of a laboratory workshop feel as opposed to a PowerPoint. So we're excited. We'd love to have you join us at the SV Focus Lab.
And if you can't make it to Northwest Arkansas, guess what? It's going to be hybrid format. So that means there will also be an online component for those who can't travel in but still want to be a part of the process. Wish we could still have a cup of coffee with you, but it'll still be great to learn with you even if we can't. So look forward to seeing you at the SV Focus Lab, September 11th through the 13th of 2025. All right, Ryan. So, we got to wrap up this Get Your Mind Right series. And today we're going to talk about kind of what are the 6 traps to be ready for or to try and avoid going into a session.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the Leading Edge in Emotionally Focused Therapy with your hosts, Dr. James Hawkins and Dr. Ryan Rana. EFT is a dynamic model that humbles even the most seasoned therapists. Together, we want to come alongside you as you continually push the leading edge of your understanding and application of this wonderful model developed by Dr. Sue Johnson.
Y'all, man, it's good to be back here in Northwest Arkansas in a way. Good to be back in the studio with my friend Ryan Rana and for us just to come to you again. And we've been out on the road learning some things, but we also wanted to close up the Get Your Mind Right series. And it's been great to hear feedback from some of you about how the Get Your Mind Right series has helped you in the way we intended, to be able to listen to a particular maybe episode that's dealing with a set what might be coming in. By the way, congratulations. Y'all listen to the podcast because we tell you get ahead of the block, right? And so anyway, today what we're going to be focused on is 6 key areas or traps that you could fall into in a session, and how can you prepare yourself to not, in a sense, fall into these traps when they come in.
Yeah, it's good to be back also with you, Lieutenant Hawkins. I just found out that James was an officer.
Yeah.
A Mustang officer.
Ooh.
In the U.S. Air Force, which is impressive. I'm kind of intimidated now.
I'm going to tell Nicole I'm a Mustang.
You should tell her that. She might already know. I don't know. We also apologize. We've had a little bit of a break here. Yeah. James just came off a 3-part trip. I'm not even brave enough to try that. And then I've had some significant health stuff. So anyway, it's good to be back with you.
For sure.
The first thing I want to say on this episode is I want to be cautious and humble around this, because what we're going to define as traps is what a lot of people do with really good intentions. And I'm sure they have some success. But we're going to define them. We're going to talk about the danger in these 6 areas. And before we even start, I just want the listeners to know the reason we've defined them as traps is because I've been in every one of them. I've made these moves. I don't want to call them mistakes, but I've made these approaches, and then couples have taught me, as well as some more experienced people in my 26 years, hey, keep going here. This is not really where you want to stop off. Yes, you could approach this. It's going to appear this way, but there's a more likely path to help you get to the kind of change that you want. So again, I don't want to disrespect anyone. If you hear this and you say to yourself, hey, that's how I do this, please, no disrespect. We're just trying to have a dialogue about it. But we want to talk about it because it's important.
All right. So how about we do this then, Ryan? We're gonna like probably elaborate on them in very small ways. But what are the 6 areas that we're talking about here?
Want to list them out first?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So when I think about, I've had a lot of conversations about the concept of fray in the last week. And I even talking with my wife about it at home. And I'm like, it's such a key thing, this focus with fray. If you want to go back a few episodes, you can listen to it. But it's really a failure because, and I am failing in this way, which I don't like. And by failing, I just mean I teach it and teach it and teach it. People kind of get it, and then they don't retain it under pressure, you know. And so we're having a conversation around that. How can I do a better job? How can we make it more clear? But in fairness to all of us, the real attachment work in a relationship is very, very hidden. It's underneath there. It's behind, 5 walls. It takes a lot of training to see this. And these 6, we're going to call them traps, are they're more on the surface. Like you're gonna see these things as you're trying to get into the attachment channel where we can create the kind of change that EFT research is based on. So enough qualifiers. Here they are. Number 1, when you see a couple, excuse me, when you see a couple and they're stuck in a vicious cycle, the traps that are there, they are going to appear as very, very unskilled. They're going to look like they don't know how to do this. They don't know how to talk to each other. And that can show up in different ways. One of them is in polarization. So you take a couple who might have been somewhat compatible years ago, have them be stuck for a long time and let the safety get really low. And what you're going to find is they balance the boat in many areas. One person wants to talk a lot, one person doesn't. So good old pursue, withdraw, dance. But even stuff like one person always wants to be a morning person, the other person never does. One person always wants to go out and be social. One person's a homebody. Like you start seeing this, and sometimes that's just part of it. But a lot of times that's not hardwiring. A lot of times that is the system balancing itself, because that's what systems have to do. It's homeostatic if you go back to your grad school. So they'll appear unskilled. Sometimes clients say things that are so misattuned, and you're thinking, oh man, this poor person doesn't know how to, they just don't have any skills. When in reality, they somehow have all the skills to make a living and to do all these effective things in their life. And they found your office so they can communicate, right? So hanging in there and remembering what you're seeing is an artifact of lots of time outside of safety, as opposed to a significant deficit in skill. So that can show up as polarization. It can show up also as very incompatible. And so what we know is that compatibility actually is not a great predictor of outcomes. But when safety is really low, people get more and more incompatible. So anyway, number 2, I'll go faster this time instead of teaching it.
That's all right. I like that.
These all kind of overlap. The second one is that they don't really have problems. They just can't communicate. The messages are getting sent sideways. And along those same lines, they will appear. And again, this is what everyone will see. Our training says, don't stop there. Keep going. Keep looking for something that's more at the motivational level. Don't get caught up in the symptoms. But number 3 is the idea of love languages. Neat book, neat concept. Everybody stuck in a cycle will appear to not know or not be able to meet the person's love languages. Number 4, kind of related, is the trap is there that instead of getting curious, assembling the things that are going deeper later, enactments of things that we do and we know work, you'll be tempted to teach them to do that.
Teach them skills.
Teach them communication, exercises, those sort of things. We'll come back to this in a minute.
Okay.
And then the 5th one for me is you'll be tempted to just want to mediate. I was at a conference recently, and it was a sex conference, and it was talking about how one partner will be, at the sink doing dishes. The other partner will come up from behind them and surprise them and just like take them from behind in sort of a playful, sexual way, and how that doesn't work. And in the role play, or the session that, the person who was being grabbed was talking about how they didn't like that. And it's so tempting to want to go, okay, well, how do you want to be touched? Right now, okay, can you do this? So if you'll do this, maybe you'll do this. And now we're going to mediate this, and that'll help them find that. And that's a trap.
Mediating.
Yep. And then the last one, which this is kind of a trap, kind of not. So this kind of makes the list, kind of doesn't. This moves more towards that might be a good approach. But in a vicious cycle, what you're going to see is the power of people's trauma. Okay? And like, man, the habits I have, my learned instincts, my tendency, what my nervous system tells me to do, you can feel, you can tell that it's being informed by my past trauma. And so one of the traps could be, oh, this person's got to work all those trauma issues out before they can do relationship work. So that's not a complete trap like as much as the other ones are, but it's not true most of the time. So there's my 6 traps.
Can I
what
go
do you
back
think?
up to, I want to make sure I understand number 2.
Yeah.
What's number 2?
I put number 2 as, it's really, an overlap here, but they can't communicate. Meaning,
Oh, just saying that. Okay.
yeah, meaning they both want the same things. There's nothing else really wrong. They just can't communicate.
Okay.
Their signals are missing. Like sometimes it can appear that way.
Okay,
Yeah.
got you.
There's your 6. What do you think?
I like it. And I can see where, if I'm going to be honest with you, I've gotten caught. And I like what you said.
Me too.
I can get why you said don't call it completely a trap,
Yeah.
but I can see how you could get trapped with each one of these.
For sure.
Because I liked how you did it. It's like there's a good intention and a focus to it. And maybe at the right time and the right moment when they're not in distress, you can do some of this. But if they're in distress and you start trying to do this, you will get stuck.
Yep.
Okay.
I've done all of them. And I had a big hard case in October that I talked about on here, and I got my leg got caught in a couple of these. It's easy to do. This is what my main message here. I know we're going to go to a break next and come back and unpack these, but my main message is when you step in the room, this is what your eyes are going to see. This is what you're going to hear. This is what it looks like, right? And so, I just got diagnosed with pneumonia 3 weeks ago, and the doctor, I was impressed. He could differentiate really quickly based on the sound of my lungs. This is this is that. He knew what pneumonia sounds like. This is what unsafe couples sound and look like. The problem is it's not quite the same as pneumonia. Just because they sound and look like that, it's not always telling you exactly what's causing it. It's more of a correlation or a symptom.
Whoa. Okay. Well, we're going to take a break and we're going to talk about a few exciting things we got coming up. And then we're going to come back and break each one of these down in a little bit more elaborate form here. All right, man, Ryan, there's a lot of different trainings we get to be a part of, some that we're doing together, some that we're doing individually. And we got a couple externships coming up. Ryan, why don't you let us know about some of those coming up?
Yeah, 90% of the time we don't even tell people our schedule. So you can always check in on James or my website if you want to join us. But there's 2 externships coming up this summer of 2025 that bring unique offerings. I'd love to invite you to come train with me if that's what works for you. Either maybe you haven't done externship for EFT, or maybe you have and would like to do a repeat. Most communities give a significant discount for your second time through. So, excuse me. The first one is a brand new community in Indianapolis, Indiana.
All right.
So we're launching. We're pushing off the dock for the first time, July 9th through the 12th, 2025 in Indianapolis. So this is a new community. They're super excited. They're also a little nervous. Are we going to make? And they'll make.
Yeah.
And but I'll tell you what's unique about them is you get to be on the ground floor of something new. And it's going to be an externship, and it's going to be a smaller group. So you might have 15 or 12 or 17 as opposed to 60. Both are great, but you get a chance to have like a small group experience for externship, and that's pretty rare.
Yeah.
The second one offers something new, and that's the one in Northwest Arkansas. This is our big family reunion.
Yeah.
So George Fowler will be with us. I'll be there. I think you're going to.
I'll make a few appearances.
Some cameos.
Yeah.
Which we really appreciate.
Thank you.
And it's in Northwest Arkansas, July 29th through August 1st of 2025. And it's a big one. This is where we develop a lot of our material, you know, the nuance. So it becomes a little bit of a think tank. So we'd love to have you either one of those externships if it works out for your schedule, either new or as a repeater.
Yeah. And you won't be able to make it to this one, but I'll be in Atlanta next week in the lovely Atlanta EFT community. They do a great job there. Love being a part of it. You can always check out their website because I will be going back there for core skills as well. Just an awesome community doing a lot of good things there. But I'd also want to make sure in 2025, there's a couple cool things that Ryan and I have. Well, one particular that we have coming up. We are going to be doing the Leading Edge Retreat with the Minnesota EFT community. Great people up there. They've got a great trainer and Kurt up there. Really love what they're doing. And this training, the Leading Edge Training 1, on April the 8th of 2025, Ryan's going to be leading a time for people who are supervisors, being supervised, or even think about wanting to be supervision. But the whole focus there is how do we get the most out of our EFT supervision? So I think that'll be really beneficial, especially if you need supervisor CEUs. That'd be great. And then following that, on April the 9th through the 11th, Ryan and I are going to be running an advanced training on working with some of the stuff you hear on this material and in the SV around blocks and reactivity and pivotal focus moments in the clinical process to help you just refine your skills and your practice and focus in those moments. So we'd love to have you there. They're doing a great job organizing it because there's going to be a lot of learning, but there's also great time to play. And once again, it's near the Mall of America. So, hey, that'll be a good time to hang out for sure.
We'd love to see you any one of them if your schedules work. It's really a blessing to us to be able to meet you in person because we know we talk into the can. Don't even know who's listening. So it's pretty cool to see you on the road. Hope you can make it.
All right. So Ryan, back into this list. Now you've explained it to us and you definitely did a great job with the first one. So it depends. You want to go back to number one? You want to go right to number two?
I said a lot. I'd love for you to jump in. What are your thoughts? What are your concerns? What do you notice?
Okay. Yeah. As I look at the list, and one thing I appreciate that you said, and I hope the listeners heard, specifically, Ryan is saying when the couple is really stuck in distress, you've got to watch out, enter into these things because you can get stuck. So that's one. So I like it. It's each one. What I really heard you saying, Ryan, that I appreciated, that I liked is you honoring the humanistic part of EFT. And I think it's like making sure we see our clients as capable and as competent. And so not only approaching it as, oh, you can't do this because you don't have skill. Because our clients do have some skill, which then makes us really kind of like say, what's the problem? And I think you said a key line that I hope everybody caught is the problem with some of these. I could teach them skills. I could help them focus on like these high points of communication. I could tell them each other's love languages. I could try and be their mediator. And maybe I could go and talk about each one of their traumas. But you said the key line was, but can they retain it under pressure? So the key part, I think, with EFT that's different is we intentionally invite our clients, the pressure that they feel in the negative cycle, we invite them to experience that pressure in session to see if they can practice new moves while they are under pressure. So that's that's my summation of each one of these. It's the experiential work of EFT and not just it's teaching you a skill outside of the pressure, but it's being in the pressure and helping you practice new moves. That's my summation of the list.
That's great. I do, I don't want to, certainly not want to disrespect anybody. Mm-hmm. I don't even really want to disrespect the ideas. Once again, I've done all these things, and occasionally I have a bad session and I go back to it. But if you do enough of this, you'll see that there's, if you keep passing that exit, I think of a metaphor always. It's like you see that exit, you see that opportunity, and then couples will teach you over the years, keep going. Mm-hmm. There's 4 more exits in front of you that's going to sort of get behind some of this to what's driving this as opposed to just treating the symptoms. So, but I do want to be clear. We do want to affect all these things, mm-hmm. Okay? No doubt. I do want to affect your habits of skill. Not teaching it, but I do want to affect how you talk to each other. Mm-hmm. Whether you want to call that communication. The problem with communication, it's a word I don't let my clients use in session. I know it sounds really weird, but here's the problem with communication, right? Like what percentage of communication is verbal? 10, roughly. 10%. So 90% of communication is nonverbal.
That's right.
So when people say we've got communication problems, they're literally saying we act wrong.
That's right.
And so what does communication not mean? The correct answer is nothing.
That's right.
And if a word means everything, it means nothing. So it's just not really a real useful word. But anyway, we definitely want to affect communication.
And so what I love that you're saying is what Ryan's not saying it doesn't matter, but do you really want to spend the most of your energy on something that only has 10% of the effect? No, you don't. You'd rather probably go to, well, what's the other 90%? Because that has the highest likelihood of helping this couple change the cycle versus focusing on the 10%.
Yeah, we want to hit that limbic revision.
Exactly.
We want to create experiential, motivational, habitual shifts. And that's why the research on the outcomes and the relapses is so strong in EFT.
And I'll throw in there, I've been that person, and I did a great job, I think, trying to teach couple skills.
I bet you're good at it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I could explain it with the best of them. But the problem is they would come in the next session and they would feel defeated because they couldn't do the skill, and I would feel defeated as a therapist. And then going back to the next one, then what do I do? Do I just blame them? And keep saying like, well, you can't do this because
you didn't use your skills.
Exactly. Which is just, that feels good for nobody. What a shaming feeling to come in, right?
And I don't want to push here with some kind of mean edge. And I'm not being literal here per se, but you could argue that you've done harm. When I've entered the system at the wrong level, and even with good intentions, have done my interventions, but we know they can't hold it. Right? If I'm drowning, I'm not good at catching a football.
Yep.
No matter how many times you teach me to get my hands right, and I can even maybe do it on the land, but as soon as I get back in that water, my body is so focused on keeping my head above water, I can't use the skill.
There we go.
So you've taught me something that now is demoralizing.
There you go.
Because I can't do it. We're failing. We must be really bad, or I must be really bad, which is exactly what the cycle's already doing to them.
That's right. And I want to just focus on one of George's clients taught me this very valuable lesson I've never forgotten years later. At the end of the session, George was kind of doing his move 5, checking in, summarizing. Sorry if you've heard this story. But at the end, he asked the client, so how did today's session set for you? And the client said a line that I think is important here. He said, we had many other therapists and they were good, but they kept teaching us to do things that we were already bad at. So that just, when the client said that line, it just went through my body. Yeah. And not for you, like at least for me, I had to ask myself, am I trying to teach my clients to do things that they're already trying, but the negative cycle keeps taking and using against them? Then if that's the case, then I need to shift my focus and do something else then.
Yeah. I had a similar experience Monday of this week. I have an individual client who came out of an unsuccessful process with a couples therapist, and he was respectful. He was like, hey, the therapist was wonderful and sweet, but what we did was we just unpacked what happened that week over and over. And we ended up just trying to mediate it differently, and nothing ever changed. I'm like, yeah. So it's easy to step in those traps.
Okay.
Can
I give one more metaphor?
No, please do.
Then I'm going to give it to Ryan.
No, you do it.
Okay. Because what I like here is also reminds me of like when someone's drowning in the water, do you start shouting? I might have gotten this one from you, Ryan. Do you start shouting out how to do the different swim strokes? Like, no. The breaststroke is like this, or the backstroke should be like this. No. What you have to do with that person is you have to first stabilize them, stop them, help them stop from drowning. Then you can bring them to the side of the water and say, what happened there? Here's what we could do different. Yep. So what I like about this list, going back again, it's not trying to teach someone who's drowning how to swim. It's saying, let me get into the water with you, help you calm down, settle, get you to some safety to where we can talk about what happened and what got in the way that kind of got you into that drowning situation, and how do you get out of that space? Yeah,
it's a powerful image, the terrible image of someone drowning, but it is a good metaphor.
Ryan don't like water on his face.
It's good for me because I don't swim well. But it's also a paradox, because do I want them to use different swim technique? I absolutely do. But giving it to them is just the wrong angle of entry, so most of the time. So we want to take the dock to them. You bring a dock out, the floating dock, bring it out to me in deep water when I'm panicked, let me get my arm on there. I will naturally start to breathe differently.
I like that.
You won't have to say, Ryan, take deep breaths. I already will. Coming out of a drowning experience, when I'm safe with you, when the danger's out of the room, what will really surprise you is this person who appears to be using terrible skill technique and you start thinking they're me. Like, man, this person never went to swim school, or maybe they're just not very coordinated. And you didn't realize, beneath the surface, what you're not seeing is they're trying not to drown. So you take that dock over to them, you hang out with them, you let them catch their breath. Sometimes they'll shock you. They'll put their feet up against that dock and they'll swim off with beautiful swim technique. And you're like, where was that? And I'm like, where that was safety. So people will shock you that they are actually way more skilled than they appear once you have safety. And once you can start to just slowly cue up, things like enactments. So I'll talk about Sue and Gottman real quick. Sue talked about, I remember, man, this must have been 19 or 18 down in Louisiana. She was so incredibly gracious. I always felt terrible because Sue's like this world famous, whatever, all the things she was. And I would always like email her or call her and say, Sue, please ignore this. I know you're busy. Just anytime in the next month. She'd call me right back. Just incredibly responsive, which was sweet. And so I was trying to launch a community down there, and I didn't have much traction. It's like, anyway, you could join us, on day one? Sure. Yeah. I'm like, just 5 minutes. So she joined us. We videoed. Were you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, we videoed her in, and she's talked for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
Just incredibly gracious. So always giving credit to Sue. But one of the things that she said that I hadn't heard before or which I'd forgotten is, when you evaluate people's skill, communication, love languages, right, all that sort of, and even mediation stuff, when you're evaluating them in a cycle, it's like looking at how a goldfish swims when they're out of water, right? It's like they're going to be flopping everywhere, and you're going to think, man, this fish is unskilled. I don't think they got the right love language. But what you're seeing, so being redundant here, is they're out of the environment of safety. So you don't want to diagnose people or reach conclusions about them until we can see them in a safe place, and they'll surprise you sometimes how well they swim. I guess this is a swimming theme.
Wow.
Today.
That's a really good metaphor and image.
Yeah. And then the thing with John Gottman, I really was impacted by his book in 96, The Marriage Clinic, and especially the first 3 or 4 chapters. I use them all the time, still do. I think it's the best research maybe that's ever been done on what married people do, which again doesn't always apply perfectly when trying to take it to distress, but still very valuable. Right in his research around, the use of communication skills, speaker listener stuff, and so one of his big findings is he divided out these relationships between master couples and disaster couples. And he said in 94% of the areas, you can't tell the difference. The big difference is the master couples can repair us, a deep sense of us, the bond. So he was saying that alongside what we're doing in EFT. But in the telling of that, he also said, it's important to know that these master couples who are going to succeed, we can predict with 90% accuracy they're going to make it and they're going to continue to grow. And he had this the variables that predicted that. One of the things that he said is they don't use those techniques. Healthy couples don't actually use the communication techniques that a lot of couples therapists teach. So we got to think about that a little bit. If they're not using it, why would we go to someone who's drowning and try to put another cognitive load on top of what's already difficult? So how much skill do you need to have a secure bond? How compatible do you really need to have a secure bond? Do you need to be to have a secure bond? And the answer is actually shockingly low. If you can repair your bond, you can have tons of differences. Quoting him again in his book, The 7
Principles of Marriage or something?
I think that is right. I think it's chapter 1 or 2. He talks about this couple out of New York, and they are just on the surface remarkably incompatible. They just don't have hardly anything in common. But they do a beautiful job, what he calls friendship. I would call sacrificial love, and even better at repair. So he tells a story about them being different religions and how one of them gets up at 6 a.m. on whatever day it is and rides a train for an hour and a half to go sit in a synagogue and holds their partner's hand, only to get back on a train and ride 2 hours to go to a mass, and they hold hands. And this is one of the highest scoring couples he ever studied. They had almost no compatibility. So you don't need to be a highly skilled person because most of bonding is behavioral. Can you make good eye contact? Can you stay present? Can you show on your nonverbals that I'm with you, that you're ARE? Can I take 30 seconds of tuning you in to my inner world? That's all the skills you need. Corrective experiences are small, deep, but not fancy. And so if we're teaching fancy, we're at risk of polluting something that's simple.
Man, that's good, Ryan. I mean, the whole thing, I think for me, I feel like this podcast, maybe it's not like we're not giving you all this, like, do this, then do this. I appreciate this. I feel like this podcast, to me, it's like a mindset switch a little bit, which that was the part of the get your mind right, to say, like, hey, as I'm going into session, like, let me watch out, like to see these people, like, when they're safe, they actually are highly skilled individuals. They do have the ability to communicate, and they might have different ways in which they understand or receive love or communicate love. And they could do that great. And they could be flexible with that when they feel safe. I guess y'all hear I'm just running through the reframe of each one of Ryan's 6. And yeah, it's great for them to have skills and the ability to be flexible and pivot in how they communicate at different times. But I can't teach that to them in a sense of why they're drowning. And then also, like, the number 5, can I say this too? On number 5, I remember many days trying to mediate between couples. You want to know, in some ways it worked, Ryan, but not the way we want it to. They would then unify against me sometimes. Because when you start trying to teach them, they will unify in this way. We tried that. We did that. And then they start looking at you like you're the crazy therapist with a wart growing out of, something like kind of thing.
Yeah, when we do that, what you're inadvertently saying is, look, fake it. I know you don't really trust your partner. I know you don't feel safe with them, but just say these phrases, hoping that the nonverbals won't tell the truth.
Yeah.
Well, we know that that's not how that works. Yep. You could say great phrases to me, but I'll read that trigger in your eyes, which says something.
Yep.
And then next thing you know, I'm going to go back to my hyperactivating protection strategy.
So you know how this has shown up for me recently, Ryan? This particularly, maybe it's not the way you intended. But even when I do enactment sometimes, and maybe the responder kind of waffles in their response, they kind of like, I want to be there, but I also don't fully trust what's happening here. The other person will pick up on it. Typically in this situation where I've run into has been the pursuer. And what happens is I'll go over to the person who shared vulnerably, and I'll say, hey, so what happens in your body right here, right now, as your partner says, I can see what you're going through, and I'm so sorry. What happens in your body right here, right now? If they used to express mistrust, Ryan, that's where I would go to mediating. If they say something like, my body still doesn't trust it, I'll be like, oh no, I've got to rescue what the person just did so they don't feel like a failure. But can you see how nicely they said it? Can you see this? Maybe not to the extreme, but I start trying to sell it. I'm just telling on myself. I would start trying to sell the good intent in some ways. But what I've learned here recently is when the person says, I don't trust it, I've learned to help my body to say, thank you, good job. Can I just stay here with you? And what is the mistrust? Instead of trying to mediate and negotiate it, to accept it and to learn from it and to take it for what it is, that not every moment in state, particularly EFT stage 1 or 2, but I'll say stage 1, you don't have to make it all feel nice and pretty. Lisa Palmer-Olson's helped me with that. She says, we're not trying to fix everything in stage 1. Yep. We're just trying to stabilize things in stage 1.
We don't need every session to end positively.
That's right.
In fact, that's probably harmful. There's that.
You and George helped me with that one. I used to resist. I wanted to be the optimist.
Yep.
And have you heard my reframe on this?
Did you say optimist or withdrawer?
You got me. That was good. I'm on my toes today, though. But I was like, don't try and sell it like it was a Barney film when it was actually Godzilla.
Yeah.
Sorry if y'all don't know who Barney is. He was this cartoon character that was super nice and lovely. Yeah. He was a dinosaur, but he was nice. So sometimes I would try and be like, oh, Barney, hey, I love you, you love me. We're all a happy family.
Before long, I don't listen anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. But I got it. Hey, I get it. Godzilla of the cycle just came through and knocked buildings down. Yep. This was rough. I'm sorry.
I got stuck with you.
And I don't have to mediate that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know. That one stuck out to me.
Yeah, and leaving them in tension is not such a bad thing.
Yep. And then I want to go to the treat trauma first one too.
All right.
Because do I need to treat trauma, or do I need to help this person whose nervous system got hijacked by crises in life, do I need to help them befriend their nervous system to learn to listen to it again, make contact with themselves, and then learn how to reach, even when they don't trust, helping them learn how to reach to their partner, even with that mistrust still loaded in their body. So it's not really about treating all the traumas. It's helping restore the process that trauma threw off in them, I would say.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I got 3 or 4 comments. I'll start with that one since you loaded it. Yeah, I mean, of this list, trauma is the trap that I would sort of say is not quite as much of a trap, because you're reading it properly, right? I mean, when someone goes left, when it's obvious they should go right in a relational move, a lot of times that is trauma speaking. The problem with that is to separate them out is the slowest way to heal, because all trauma is relational. The fang in the trauma is relational. Even if it's like a one vehicle car accident, what we know is that the brain goes in a trance-like state following a traumatic event for up to 2 weeks. And so the way the ambulance driver speaks to me as I'm laying on the ground, the way the hospital operates with me, or in my dissertation, if I'm sexually assaulted, the way the nurse operates with me in the hospital, how they touch me or get the samples, those go a long way towards determining how my body will code the trauma. Because the danger of trauma is model of self. The vast majority of trauma that we'll see is non-injurious, right? Especially of sexual trauma. It's what does this mean? What's this say about me? What's this say about the world? So now you're going to attachment, you see. So it's the attachment that heals the trauma. So ideally speaking, you wouldn't separate it. You would have your partner with them. If I have to walk you through the most dangerous thing in the world, wouldn't it be nice if someone that you love was there holding your hand?
That's right.
Even if it's not a perfect hand, because there is no perfect hand. And remember, EFT is a trauma model. Stage 2, we're all in it. We're just stage 1, we're trying to stabilize it first. I will say this, though. You know, I remember consulting with Gail 2013 and 14 a lot. She probably got sick of hearing from me. And this is a question I'm like, at what point do you say, hey, we can't do couples, this is too rough? And, you know, she's awesome and flexible. Like, no problem. You might try this, you might try that. But really for me, I've only done this twice in the last decade. But all my cases appear that, man, trauma's driving this and you got to go get the trauma first. But that's rarely the case. But I have had a couple. And the parameters for me, this is just Ryan talking today. I reserve the right to be wrong. Would not be the first time. Is I can't get safety for either person. That's my parameter. If I've done all my moves, my containing, my whatever block, whatever, use of self, attunement, whatever it is, if I've done everything and I can't get safety for either person, I start to go, hey, maybe this one needs some more support for a while. It almost starts to function like a minor contraindicator. Maybe they're going to have to slow the nervous system down a little bit somewhere else or on the side. But the question for me is that really that they can't do the safety, or is that me? Right? And so if I'm not clear on my model, your trauma is going to look a lot worse. So uncontained, unfocused work, trauma is going to look like a beast. If you can focus sessions, it's still a challenge, but it's a little bit less so.
That might be a good podcast to come back to, is what does it mean to bring containment and focus to trauma work? That might be a good one to come back to.
That is good. Let's write that down. Hey, real quick, I know we're over time. I want to comment on love languages real quick, because I want to be clear. I heard someone say, Ryan said love languages is stupid. I did not say that. I think it's neat. I think it's a neat book. I think it's a nice metaphor. Remember, it's just a metaphor. There's no blood test that shows your love language is X, Y, or Z, but it's a good metaphor. And it is, I can totally see why the author wrote it, because that is what it will look like in every vicious reactive cycle. And my clients often come in talking about it. And guess how they talk about it? When the safety in their relationship is low, they get rigid. And so what that does is they sort of weaponize love languages. Yep. Now this is how my language isn't being spoken.
Yep.
When a relationship is super safe, that book's great.
Yep.
It's a great conversation starter. Oh, honey, you'd like to be touched more? Sure. Or
That's right.
whatever that is. So the problem is when you try to give it to an unsafe, high distress relationship, it's the wrong order of change.
Because I've seen them use that to dig their heels in.
Yep,
well,
for sure.
you know, this is how I speak love, and you've got to learn how to appreciate that and accept it. Like, whoa, I don't think that's why the book was written like that.
Yeah. And I say this every once in a while, and the whole crowd goes, "Oh," and like writes this, so I'll say it on here. As a rule, you know what your love language is? Whatever you're not getting enough of. That's what your love language is, which could be in this relationship and or in your family of origin. So if you're deprived of touch in this relationship and you came from a family that didn't touch, oftentimes your body is craving it. That doesn't say anything about a hard wiring. That's an adaptive move, which makes good sense.
That's right.
But handing a book to the partner when things are not safe very rarely works well. And when it's been tried to be researched, it was not good.
That's right. I like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, but I don't want one for every meal, though.
Right. Unless you never
My
had
body's
one.
going to need different things at different times. And that's where you kind of, is like, there's the flexibility in the love languages in a way. What we want when people can be healthy in a way.
For sure. So what's distinct from these 6 areas for EFT? Well, EFT runs parallel. We're not completely different from these things. Again, we want to affect all these just at the order at which it's stuck. So at the motivation level, the deeper level. But so the way we do attuned heavy use of self-affect assembly, the way that we create enough insight with the 3 Ps, right, which is my pain, my protection, and how it lands on my partner, that is insight. That is psych ed.
Yep.
We are doing some of these pieces.
That's right.
So we got to trust that. And then the way that we are doing our enactments, some people say, well, aren't enactments just like doing communication techniques? I'm like, interesting question. They're not completely dissimilar.
That's right.
They're just much more proximal.
That's right.
See, a communication technique is me leaving my client to go get information from a library and then saying, hey, come do this library thing. Whereas an enactment is very proximal. I'm right on the edge, the leading edge of their experience, and I'm just asking for one more sentence, trying to get their body to feel what security feels like again.
And then saying, now could you turn and share this fear with your partner?
Yes.
While you feel it in your body right here, right now.
Right now. Yep. So lastly, I would just say, whatever your approach is it experiential? Is it impacting safety? Is it impacting emotion and view of self and view another? And right, that's what EFT is designed to do.
Well, y'all, thank y'all for being with us in that Get Your Mind Right series. And as always, me and Ryan want to say thank you. You know, as we go out and we get to look in your eyes and just hear your passion for your clients. Like even listen, like, so one, I think, Ryan, as I was thinking about our audience today, I really appreciate their motivation. They don't have to listen to this podcast. And I'm not even just talking about our podcast. There's a lot of great podcasts out there. There's the Family Express with Catherine DeBrain.
So good.
Which is EFFT. There's the Couples Couch with Shane Burkle. There are so many out there. So, but what I appreciate is your willingness to say, hey, I'm willing to give 20 minutes, 30 minutes to just refine my focus, to learn and to get better. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Yeah, my thank you is related. I was at a training and there was 4 of us trainers standing there, and someone very shy walked up and said, "Can I ask you a question? I'm embarrassed to ask this." I'm like, "No problem." And she's like, "I love what you're doing, but I really like to do speaker listener techniques. Y'all do that some, don't you?" And we're like, nope, right? We don't. But it's okay if you do. And that's my message here too, is like, hey man, do what you do. I respect whatever you're doing. If you're trying to help people, we're on the same team.
That's it.
I will say, I know the trainer team fairly well. And in these 6 traps, you'll hardly find any of us. But I only say that to say this. All of us have been in all those traps.
That's right.
So I want to say thank you for getting trapped in this stuff. And if you're someone who's been teaching speaker listener for years, I really respect that. Because I can tell you it's going to feel like mud. And you're going to be 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And I respect the energy of how you got to fight through this sometimes to find that second order work. This is not easy. And your clients are worth it. So thank you for all that beautiful work.
Because what came up for me was you can't get caught in the trap in the jungle unless you're first brave enough to willing to go into the jungle. So if you got caught in some of these, it's because you were brave enough to go into the fight with couples. So
and by the way, getting out of those traps builds muscle.
Yep.
And that's the muscle we need to go do second order work.
And I could do a podcast episode. I'll tell you all the ways James has learned to try and stay out of the traps.
I'll tell you, I'm not a huge love language guy, but I am a learning language guy. And my learning language is failure and humiliation. So the more times I get stuck, that's really how I improve.
That might be a good podcast episode. All right, y'all. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you for listening. We hope this experience helps you push the leading edge in your work to help people connect with themselves and with each other. Please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a 5-star review. You can contact us at pushtheleadingedge@gmail.com, and you can follow us on our Facebook page at Push the Leading Edge. You can follow Ryan on Facebook at Ryan Rana Professional Training and on his website, ryanranatraining.com. You can follow James on Facebook and Instagram at DocHawkLPC. You can also check out his website, dochawklpc.com.